subject which I would like to discuss tonight is a subject which is a bit of enigma for me for about 15 years at least. And I think I got finally at least to one appreciation of the subject. What are the Aseres HaDibros? Okay, that's a very important idea. What are the Aseres HaDibros? As far as, you look at them, they're mitzvahs that are in the Torah. A sampling of the mitzvahs. So we took 10 mitzvahs together, and that's what we gave on Har Sinai. What is so special about these mitzvahs that groups them together, that makes them the Aseres HaDibros, and what is it that we are accomplishing when we accept upon ourselves the Aseres HaDibros? That's like the question that I would like to explore. I think it's a very simple question, but I do believe that it's a very important question. And I'm going to start with a pasuk. The pasuk calls the Aseres HaDibros a bris. Now, every bris we know is made between two sides. Okay, you have some kind of a treaty between two nations that make a bris. Yaakov and Lavan made a bris. Okay, there's all different kinds of treaties that are done. They are bipartisan agreements, and each side has to fulfill their part, and that's what creates this kind of a thing called a treaty. So we have to understand that the Aseres HaDibros, besides for being 10 mitzvahs, they also happen to be the bris that was created between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the simple understanding. And why were these things taken for the treaty? The Mabit, there are many people who discuss different aspects of this idea, but I would like to discuss the subject of a bris by itself. What does it mean when a person has a bris and a person follows through in delivering, and when a person doesn't follow through in delivering? The reason why we are here in Galus is because we didn't deliver, right? So why are we here in Galus? Is this a punishment? How do we understand this punishment in the world of bris? In other words, in the world of schar v'aynish, we're talking about mitzvahs and averos that you did, and there's very specific punishments that are given for them. What is the punishment for the bris? And what does it mean to us in our lives? Okay, that's what I would like to discuss. I'm going to start by explaining what does it mean, why is it that Klal Yisrael is always persecuted? Why are we always, I'm not talking about today, I'm not talking about Simchas Torah 2 years ago, I'm not talking about the Holocaust, I'm not talking about the Crusades, I'm talking about why are we always persecuted? So we know the answer to that question is because we have sin. Now, this is the question which I would like to ask. And these are very basic questions. Would we have been better off not accepting the Torah? Well, I'm sure that you all understand that that's the answer I'm going to say, that we would not have been better off. But could you explain why that is so?
So we keep hearing that the Torah, that the world was created just for the Torah, so if we didn't accept the Torah, then the world would be destroyed. I don't know. Okay, and would we be better off or worse off? It wouldn't exist, so we wouldn't know the difference.
Okay, well, that's true, but that's...
Probably worse off.
Okay, so we have to explain that... It doesn't say that. That is a very bad translation. And I'm going to just tell you the way I'm going to respond to your translation is by something that I heard from Rav Noach Orlowek. The Maimer Chazal that you're quoting says, Noach leila adam sheloi nivra. Now, if you were to ask a child, is it better to be in school or better to be on vacation? What will the child say? Okay. Now, if you'll ask the child, where is it really better to be? Right? No, it's more, we all understand he has more fun when he's on vacation, doesn't school, but he understands that, if you had vacation your whole life, that would be pretty lousy, right? Vacation is very good when it's punctuated with occasional school, right? In other words, you have to have some of the important things in life in order to have a vacation, right? So you want to know which is more noach. It's more noach not to be nivra. But that doesn't mean that it's better. Understand? Noach means that you're on vacation, right? That's noach. But that's not accomplishing. Accomplishing, people who accomplish are not on vacation, right? And that's what makes it they are able to accomplish. So it's true that it would be easier for us if the world wasn't created. It doesn't mean it would have been better. Okay? That's the answer I'm giving right now to that question. But there are many answers to that question. But as good as a question it is, we understand that it's only a question. The bottom line is that we're here, and I'm going to take a mushal. You'll have two countries that go to war, and one in the olden times, and one country loses, and they take the king of that country and they put him in jail, and he's wallowing in jail. Now you ask him, why are you in jail? What's he going to say? I'm here representing my country, right? So he may be worse off than everybody else in the whole country, and he's suffering more, and the reason why is because he is the king, right? So the fact that you happen to have a position of importance is a reason why you get a more severe punishment than somebody who doesn't have a position of importance. So the Goyim, yes, that's true what was said before, if the Jews wouldn't have accepted the Torah, the world would have ceased to exist, even the Goyim, even the animals. But now that put us in the driver's seat. We're responsible for the world. And when things don't go right, we are the ones that have to take the blame. That's part of the position of power. Also has in it what's called a word which I think they took it out of the English dictionary about 10 years ago, the word responsibility. I don't know exactly. I heard my grandmother knew what that word meant. But that is a very important concept. People who are responsible will pay the consequences. Why? Because they can pay the consequences. People that are irresponsible, they don't even know how to pay the response. They don't know how to pay the consequences. They don't understand that they did anything, and they don't have any idea how they can straighten anything out. So this is what makes Klal Yisrael what's called, I'll just share with you, when I was a teenager, there was a guy in my shul who was a war survivor, and he was a very smart fellow. And he had a business and he would work, but he also was very involved in politics and all kinds of things. And he once, and this was in 1982 or 83, when Sabah Shatila happened. I don't know if people know what I'm talking about. The Israelis went into Lebanon, into some kind of a camp, of Arabs that were there, so to speak, in confinement, and they murdered them. This is what the world was saying at the time. And this fellow called up, did not address the person. This was on the most provocative talk show in America mid-morning. He called up and he listed 10 places in the world that the exact same atrocities are going on at a much greater scale. And why is it that you're speaking on the Jews in Israel? This is a question that was asked. And the person who was the manche, I forgot I said that in English already, the guy who runs the show. What? Yeah, the anchorman, I guess, I don't know what you call him exactly. What the DJ, I don't know, whatever you want to call the guy. So he said something which is amazing. And his words made a lasting impression on me. This guy, who was a known anti-Semite, this is what he said. The Jews are the conscience of the world. If the Jews can do atrocities, the world is in a bad place. If the Jews don't do atrocities, if Goyim do atrocities, that's okay. But if Jews do atrocities, then we're in a bad place. This is what he said on national television in America, and it made at least a very strong impression on me, even though I didn't hear it on television. I heard it after Shavuos the next morning. But it was a very important thing. So that means that we have a responsibility which goes not only for ourselves, for our families, our communities, all of the Jews, but all of the world. We are here, and how we react will affect everything. Now, just to give you an idea of how colossal that thought is, probably from the most well-known tefillas of the year is Nisana Toikif. Right? Everybody knows that tefillah. And we say, Malachim yechofezun, v'chil ra'ado yochezun. The Malachim are trembling and they are in fear. What are they in fear of? The Malachim didn't do any sins. What are they afraid of? So the answer to the question is that how the Jews will be judged will affect them. So they're concerned because by association, they can have either a good year or a bad year based on what's going to happen to the Jews. So that means that the Jew, in his personal life and in his communal life, is really responsible for everything that happens. Okay? So you want to know why we have to suffer so much? It's partially for us, it's partially for the rest of the world, because we are responsible. This is, I'm just saying over things which are not new ideas, just I'm setting it up in a way that we could understand it a little bit better. Okay? That's the first thing that I would like to say. Now, I would like to, I'm speaking to women, so always when it comes to Shavuos and you have to speak to women, there's a bit of a challenge, right? Because to men, you can speak about learning Torah, and to women, you can't speak about learning Torah. That's not their mitzvah. That's not their avodah. Now, I'm not right now getting involved if women can learn or can't learn. It could be they can, could be they can't. That's not the subject over here. But that is not their avodah. Their avodah is their support system. And I would just like to say something which is very important. We learned this on the Psukim. When Klal Yisrael went to war, the Klal Yisrael was divided up into 3 groups, and the people on kitchen duty, they split the loot of the war together with the soldiers. It didn't make a difference if you were in combat, or if you were in kitchen duty, or you were a driver, whatever it was that you had to do, you were a soldier, so you had the same entitlement as a person who was fighting on the front lines. The women, who they are the back lines, so to speak, they have equal share, and not only that, the Torah was given to the ladies first, and they are the ones which are the upholders of the bris of Torah, in many situations, more than men. Okay, so that's why I'm speaking about the subject of the bris of Torah. Now, the idea of arvus. Arvus means that when one person does something, other people are responsible or connected to that which one person does. We'll just speak about the simple, we'll start off in the simple mashal of the guy who makes a hole in the bottom of the boat, so everybody in the boat sinks, right? So you tell him, why are you making a hole in the boat? He says, I'm only making it under my seat, right? So what's wrong with that guy is saying? Because there's no such thing as only making a hole under one seat. The whole boat is connected, and therefore, it doesn't make a difference where the hole is, under whose seat it is. We're all going to sink together. And therefore, I have a right to tell you not to make a hole under your seat. Right? I'm just explaining something which is very, very simple. Now, the people who are in the support group, they are the ones who give the people on the front lines a reason to go on fighting. This is true in all wars throughout the years. People who are the support, they are the ones who give people an idealism in their battle. To be a soldier is a very gory kind of a job, and it's dehumanizing. You have to have somebody give you a touch of humanity, otherwise a person becomes non-human, and isn't able to function properly. Now, I just would like to share with you something which I actually learned this from a secular source, but this is very, very true. In science fiction books, they have always, some superstar genius kind of a guy. He is never the captain. He's never the main guy. The main guy is a regular human guy, right? Why is that so? Because leadership isn't dependent on intellect alone. There's all kinds of things. This is, when I was a kid, they used to say that, maybe a computer could win a person at a game of chess, but not in life. Because in life, there's something called the human instinct and the human intellect, which, even though AI is here, I don't think it's yet been able to copy the anatomy of the way a human thinks and processes things. And therefore, a human will always win a computer. When I say that's always, have to be in the running, But the idea is that there's an element in humanity which raw brains cannot compete with, okay? Now, the idea of a bris has to do with this kind of an idea. And I just would like to, I'm going to throw out some examples of things. And these things are very basic in our Yiddishkeit, but I don't think that people really understand them. If I were to ask you, how important is a minig? So, it's not like the Asar Sadibris, right? But we know that the minhagim, that's what holds Klal Yisrael together, right? That's where we identify our Yiddishkeit. That's user-friendly. Those are things that we do. And whether it's, I heard this once from one of today's, he's not alive anymore, he just died in the last 2 years, one of today's most famous speakers. He said, somebody asked him once, why are the Jews so diverse, the ones from Taiman, and the ones from France, and the ones from America, the ones from Eastern Europe? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. They're all the same. All it's like, and this is my mashal, you go to a chasna and they serve rice. Every chasna they serve rice. You want to know if it's an Ashkenazi chasna or a Sephardi chasna, what color is the rice? Okay, the food is the same food. It's just the spice around it that's what changes. And this is where the minig is what gives the enhancement, gives us the flavor, and the way that we connect to our Yiddishkeit. And it has a very strong value. The minhagim are things which keep people from. That's all. It's not the big ticket items, Shmira Shabbos. It's the minhagim, the small things that people do. I'll just tell you from the men's jokes on this issue. There was a fellow who became irreligious. He was once religious, he became irreligious, and some kind of a hardship happened, and he went to his Rebbe to get a bracha. So the Rebbe said, you'll be successful and you won't have any problem with this issue as long as you're makabel that you're going to say tachnun on Friday morning. Okay? So the guy said, okay. Then he walks out and he says, say tachnun on Friday morning. I don't daven on Friday morning, Tachnun is part of davening. I don't daven on Friday morning. So then he decided, I have no choice. I have to daven on Friday morning, right? Then he realized, I can't be saying tachnun on Friday morning and not davening the rest of the time. It has to be that Friday morning is when I'm making my Kabbalah. And from this, he eventually, took on all the mitzvahs again. Now this is a minor issue, but these are the kinds of things which get people to become religious. Not that these are the things that really get people to become religious, but these are the levels on the ladder that people climb up. These small things that people do. The bris is the area where we understand by doing these things we are connected. And I just want to say something. I believe everybody has a different level of things where I say, this I do because I'm from a Jew. Some people, they learn because they're from a Jew. Some people learn Matzah on Pesach because they're from a Jew. Everybody has the thing that they do this. This I don't really understand. I do this because this is what my religion wants, and therefore I subjugate myself to allow myself to do those things. And that's the person's personal bris, that he's doing that because he's connected. And through that, he stays connected. This is something which is very, very important. Now, I'll just say that, in my house, there are 3 times a year that you eat kreplach, right? And this is discussed 3 times a year, every time we eat them, but what are the other times, and why do we eat them? It's absolutely not important, but it's very important. You know why? Because that's a minig. And it's a minig, and we keep these minhagim. This is what gives character to our days, okay? And this is why these things are important. It becomes not only of our kiyum mitzvahs, also our averos. And I'll just tell you, I have a friend of mine who comes from very strong Hasidic stock, and his kids do not understand Yiddish at all. But he does like his father. On Shabbos, he only talks Yiddish. You want to speak to him, you have to speak to him in Yiddish. He can barely speak Yiddish, so he doesn't do much talking on Shabbos. Now, I have a neighbor on Rehov Lachish here, who he on Shabbos only speaks Lashon Kodesh. He doesn't speak English at all. He's a regular American guy. He only speaks Hebrew. These are minhagim which infuses the day with Kedusha. If I know every time I say something I have to switch to a language of religion, that means that the things that I'm going to say are going to be religious things. I'm not going to tell you about the article I read in a magazine in Ivrit, right? That's not going to happen, right? So by doing so, I just won't tell you about the article that I read, that's all, right? And it'll cause you not to speak about the things that you're not supposed to be speaking about. This is a very important idea. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't speak about the things that it says in the magazines. I'm not discussing what you should be speaking about. I'm giving you an example of you have to have something which this is how you're going to say that you're committed. And that commitment comes from the fact that we accept something upon ourselves, even though we don't really understand it, we don't really know why it's done, but we know this is a religious thing to do, so then you do it. And that is something that, Mitzvah Hashem, one day you'll even get to know and understand why you're doing that. And that brings you to another level. I just would like to share with you a mashal that I heard from our Shiur, and this is a very important idea in all growth-related issues. When a person is learning and somebody tells him an idea in Torah that he never heard before, and so the expression is, did you chap that svara? It means, did you grab that svara? What is the reason that they use that word, did you chap that? So the word to chap means to grab something. Really, when I say, when do I grab something? When something shouldn't fall naturally into my possession, but it's something that's high up over there, I jump up and I grab it, and then I have a foothold in that level. Now, once I have a foothold in that level, I can already climb up to that level, and then I can chop something on a higher level. So this is when a person chops something that he didn't understand yesterday, that means that he's growing. And you have to take that place that you grew to make that your base ground, and from there you can go higher and grow to the next level. This is how we grow in our Yiddishkeit. And this is something which there are people who, I say this at all the times, there are people in all different kinds of things, that I see people who have these kind of ways that they have. I know I have my Arusa I live with every single day, that he is in the middle of writing a sefer on Hilchos Shmiras HaLashon. There is no way in the world you could tell this guy Lashon Hara. It's never going to happen, okay? And the reason why is because this is his passion. He decided to take on this work, and he's writing a sefer on this subject, and it's very important to him. It's not just what he learns. He's connected to it. It's, as they say, it's benafshoy. It's part of the fiber of who he is, and he will not hear Lashon Hara. Now, I'll just tell you, it's very difficult. The people who are Lashon Hara people, when you speak to them about Lashon Hara, something's mutter, aser, it's very difficult for them to hear anything that may be possibly mutter to speak Lashon Hara about. Okay? Now, it happens to be that yesterday I was in Yerushalayim, and in the shul that I daven in, there is a Lashon Hara shiur that's given every Shabbos after Mincha, and whenever I come, I'm given the guest speaker spot, and I give the shiur wherever they're up to. This is going on already for 15 years at least. Now, the piece that we spoke about yesterday was where the Chavetz Chaim discusses if a person did an Aveira, and if you tell somebody else that he did the Aveira, you can stop the other person from doing an Aveira. When is it that you're allowed to say this, and when is it you're not allowed to say this? And I raised a question on the Chavetz Chaim based on something that the Chavetz Chaim writes elsewhere, and the fellow was up in arms. And by the time we finished the shiur, it became evident that the Chavetz Chaim actually agrees with what I'm saying, right? But this is because there are people who have a passion for something, and they sometimes lose the forest for the trees. They're so busy trying to sustain what they imagine should be the halacha that they miss out on something else. And these are the kinds of things that happen all the time. This happened. I bump into this question every single day, multiple times. People tell me that they had a question. On my way out of Second Seder, on my way going to my car to come here today, somebody stops me and he says he wants to ask me a question even though it's not relevant anymore. So I said, so why are you asking? He said, because it could be relevant in the future. So he tells me, my wife had a baby, and we were in the hospital on Shabbos, and they decided that they want to induce her. And I asked the doctor, is it pekuach nefesh? Like, does it have to be done? So the doctor gave me a runaround, and he said, this is our recommendation, but I can't really say that it's pekuach nefesh. Okay? So he asked me, what should I have said? Okay? Now, this is the kind of a question that you can only answer this question if you're there. You have to know exactly what's going on. You know, I get these questions many times on the phone, and then I could speak to the doctor. I get exactly the information. But the doctor didn't say it's pekuach nefesh. The doctor just said, I can't tell you that anything will happen if we wait. So if the doctor tells you that, probably you should just wait. And if it becomes pekuach nefesh, they'll tell you. They're not, okay? And they will tell you, because I've experienced with this. But generally speaking, in the hospital, they have ways that they assess situations. Now, the way that they assess the situations has to do with many, many things that have nothing to do with the question at hand. For instance, maybe we're going to need, and this happens all the time, especially with delivering babies, we're going to need this room in another 2 hours. The faster we can process you out of here, the less traffic we're going to have, right? So it's very important for them that you should give birth right away, and this way you'll free up their space quicker. Now, will they tell that to you? I won't say they'll tell that to you, but I'll just give you from the things, these are women's issues, but these are very important issues. I was once at a, what?
That's what happened to me. I spoke to the old
Yeah.
and they all said, try not.
Okay, so but then you have to know each case.
When they came to me, they told me that it was my turn, and I said to them, I needed to know. I was just sure I was coming. So I said, they told me they'll give me half an hour. And then I just said to her, and then she came in and said, oh no, there's someone else who's got to go in first. And then they called me after Shavuos.
Okay,
So
I'll just tell you, when my oldest daughter was born, she was born in America. Okay, now her delivering physician, her uncle is a gynecologist. She didn't use her uncle, but she used her uncle's, his partner. Okay, and she went in and on a Thursday, and they said, we have to induce you. And I said, no one's inducing my wife on a Thursday, 3 days before Shabbos. We don't do that unless I get a heter from a Rav. So I called the Rav that at that time I used. Today's one of the Gedolei Ador. And he said, you have no reason to do anything. By Motzei Shabbos, you'll have a baby regular. That's after he heard all the facts. So I told the doctor that we're not going to do anything now, but we'll be back on Sunday morning. If nothing happens, Sunday morning. Tavita says, no, you can't come on Sunday, come on Monday. So I said, why Monday? He said, Sunday I'm off. Okay? So now you understand how important is it that she be induced. Okay? And this is a doctor which you're getting special care, so you really have to know exactly what's going on in every case. Okay? I'm just saying, but this is true in all kinds of medical situations. And sometimes it's the other way around. The doctors are too lenient, and they should be more machmer, and they should do more. I'm not saying one way or the other. But the bottom line is that you have to find something in your avodah, your personal avodah, that represents that I'm doing this because I'm a from a yid. Whether it is you're not speaking lashon hara, whether it is that you're going to make something good, special, good for Shabbos, whether it means you're going to say an extra Tehillim. I'll just tell you, somebody called me this week from here in Shul. Sometimes I get the biggest musser from people who call me from Shul with questions. He called me for Shul with questions. He said, what should I do for Klal Yisrael? Okay? So I said, you should say 2 kapitlach Tehillim every day. Okay? Now you ask me, where did I get that from? I'll tell you where I got that from. When I started going out, I asked my father, what should I do to get a good shidduch? So he said, 2 kapitlach Tehillim every day. Okay, so I said, but besides that, he said, that's your job. The rest of it is our job, okay? And Baruch Hashem, it worked out. I'm just saying that, I'm just saying that the idea that you have to be mispalel for Klal Yisrael. They're our responsibility. Klal Yisrael's our responsibility. And not only that, the cows and the elephants are also our responsibility. It's obviously more further removed. But we have a responsibility, and this is something which is very important. I think about this quite often. People tell me, what do you do for Kiruv? So a lot of times I say to the people, what do you do for Kiruv for the people who live in Tel Aviv? Okay? Now, I don't think that anybody, being that I'm speaking in English, I don't think any of you really know what people in Tel Aviv are like. But people in Tel Aviv, I'll just give you an example. I one time flew to America, and on my seat were 2 Israelis that just finished their keva in the army, and they're going Libilui Bolam, okay? And I sat in my seat, not planning to have anything to do with them at all. We ended up speaking for about 7 hours of the trip. And they told me that they couldn't believe that I'm not a Baal Tshuva. Neither of them ever spoke to a Haredi in their lives, and they couldn't believe that a Haredi person could say a sentence that has a noun, a verb, an adjective, and a pronoun in it. They didn't know that it was possible. No, this has to do with the media. Anybody who knows, and this is the way it is. Now, what could you say about such a person not being a religious Jew? Does he really even have a choice? He thinks they're a bunch of monkeys, right? Now, it's our job to turn that around. And it's possible to be done. But you have to have the opportunity to do it. You have to create the opportunity sometimes. Not everybody has that opportunity. And the most important thing is that you have to act like a mensch. I don't know how you say the word mensch in English. As when I was a kid, they used to say there's no such word as a mensch in English, okay? Because they don't have any. Anyways, but the bottom line is a person is obligated to make a Kiddush Hashem wherever he goes, whoever he's speaking to. This is a very important thing, and this is part of the bris. The bris doesn't have to do with mitzvahs or averis. It has to do with our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the way that we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is a Gemara, the Gemara in Yuma says this, if a person says, wow, this guy's such a nice guy, and he's a frumah Jew, that is a Kiddush Hashem. And a person who can cause that to happen, he has an unbelievable chelik in Olam Haba. And if you cut the other guy off, and they say, wow, look at the way these frumah Jews drive, so then you made a Chilul Hashem. Now, you want to know if you had the right to cut him off or not. I'm not getting right now involved in the laws of the road or anything like that. I'm just saying to you, the bottom line is the bris that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not depend solely on how many checks and X's we get on our scorecard. It has to do with our attitude and the way that we perform our mitzvahs. And I'm just going to end off with a fascinating question that I was asked, and my answer, which I found out afterwards, I was mechavan to Rabbi Elyashiv. Somebody asked me, he had a family, this is a common question, people that are becoming religious, should they be makbid first on kashrus or on Shabbos? I've had this with kashrus and taras hamishpach. I've had this many different kinds of questions. My answer to the question is very simple. Whichever works better. Because the idea of doing tshuva isn't about X's and checks. It's about movement. Are you moving in the right direction or not? So sometimes people could move with something big, some people with something small, but the question is, which is going to get you to the finish line quicker? That's what's really important. And our bris with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it was in our mitzvahs ben Adam Chavero or ben Adam Lamakom, has to do with our willing to let ourselves be driven by the force of Torah. The force of Torah mitzvahs will tell us to do things which we don't necessarily think that that's a thing to do. But if the Torah tells us to do it, eventually we will even see that that's what's actually for our betterment. And if we do that, the mitzvah Shem, we should be able, just a few days away, we should be zeicha to be makabel a lot of Torah and mitzvahs and bri Mashiach b'mheira.